Hello, my name is Jacob Rapp, and I'm the Director of Technical Product Management at VMware. And I'm joined here by Paul.
Paul Mancuso. I'm a Technical Product Manager here with the Network and Security Business Unit. We're here at Cisco Live.
Yeah, great. So we're basically, as you can see, we're here on our NSX party bus. And we're here at Cisco Live talking with our customers about the values of NSX and Cisco together. So, Paul, what brought us here at Cisco Live this year? I've been at VMware for about 4 years now. This is the first time we've really done any type of big presence at Cisco Live, even though we're sitting outside in a party bus. It's really our customers, right? And the customers have been telling us for a long time that we're strategic partners with Cisco, we're strategic partners with VMware, and we want to use both technologies together. So how are you doing this? And this kind of brings me back to maybe 3 years ago when we actually put out our initial design guide of NSX on Cisco infrastructure. And really it was driven by this customer meeting that we had with a large financial customer. We actually had a lot of the Cisco execs in a nice telepresence room. Yes, we do have a telepresence room at our Palo Alto campus. And we're all there kind of sitting together, and the customer said, okay, you're both strategic partners. I want you to present design and ideals of how you guys would work together. So Cisco presented kind of a set of ideas. We presented a set of ideas, and really the aha moment for that customer was when they said to us, and look, I get that you have your own unique advantages, and you may not agree 100% on every areas, but what I can see, there's actually a middle ground of how these things work together. So last night we were doing this presentation for our customers. Maybe we can walk through kind of what we presented. What were you there talking to the customers about?
Well, our design is based on the ideal of let's establish a foundation for the infrastructure that's stable, simplistic. There's not a lot of complexity that's built into the infrastructure, because stability is the foundation of a fine infrastructure and an operations from a day two standpoint. And NSX on top of ACI provides then that programmable network, if you will. And for us, therefore, that means let's go ahead and build a set of services that ACI essentially establishes for NSX deployment. So we came up with this design, as you mentioned, a few years back, and we've been discussing it, I think, 3-4 years in a row now at Cisco or at VMworld as well. And in that presentation, we discussed the basic fabric contents, that we're going to have essentially 3 basic tenets of this particular deployment. So we have something that we refer to as sort of the ACI fabric ideals. So in those ACI fabric ideals, we say that we want ACI to have essentially established as a layer 2 fabric. Remember, ACI runs IVXLAN inside of its fabric for its own end-to-end endpoint search and discovery of endpoints, right?
So before you go on, so this is this fabric, right? We have these physical boxes, right? So maybe here's your aggregation and maybe kind of your access topologies that are basically attaching every server, right?
Right.
Every customer, they have to have some sort of physical gear, right?
Correct.
That's a given. And that's kind of the layer 2 fabric you're talking about, right?
Yeah, see this part in here, this is essentially Cisco's VXLAN, if you will. And for them, this provides a seamless layer 2 servicing of endpoints within the fabric, so it makes it very simplistic to provide infrastructure communication.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is that I think the fabric itself has needed automation for a long time.
Correct.
Right, the physical fabric, just the provisioning, these connections of lines, the in-service software upgrades, the manageability, the troubleshooting, all of these areas have needed to be automated for a very long time, and this is kind of what Cisco's doing here.
Exactly. Actually, the infrastructure switch vendors for a long time have tried to design some type of fabric management, whether it be UE or API based, that provides a non-single box focus of infrastructure setup. The idea is that yes, we could go in and actually set up each of these particular systems, by CLI and establish communication standpoint for every endpoint that they need to communicate, or excuse me, every particular infrastructure connectivity they have to. But the idea is that trying to figure out a way to provide more of an overview of how you would go ahead and establish fabric communication from a much higher level so that you're not doing everything individually box by box. And Cisco ACI is ACI's current version of doing so. Right? So for us, therefore, it came about, let's go ahead and try to leverage what they have so that we'll take advantage of the idea of them establishing a series of abstractions that provide NSX deployment on top of that environment. And that's when I went back to here saying, let's go ahead and let's actually utilize that concept, that end-to-end layer 2 fabric. And then what we need to do then is establish essentially the communication endpoints for our infrastructure kernel communication. Remember, we have in our design, in every NSX over ACI design, whether it's on ACI, Arista, Juniper, or any of the other Millennium vendors, even our own Dell, right? We still utilize the very same set of concepts. We need only 4 VLANs for the infrastructure. We only need then 2 VLANs for our north-south communication that meets the east-west communication for that infrastructure. And therefore, in ACI, we had to construct a design that said, hey, let's go ahead and provide the least amount of those abstraction that we have to create. ACI is going to request and require of them. And then we're going to go ahead and essentially make an north-south communication using those 2 additional transit.
Yeah, so basically
VLANs.
what you're saying here is like we have this, so basically here's our underlay.
Correct.
And I definitely have a lot worse handwriting than yours up there. But here's my
that's legible.
here's my underlay fabric down here. And basically what we have now is a class of fabric managers. Fabric managers. So whether you mentioned, I mean, we have Arista has the Cloud Vision. Dell has their own fabric managers. We also have Big Switch Networks. They have their big fabric manager, right? I mean, that's basically what we're saying ACI is providing is this underlay fabric management. And then, okay, what's above this line, I think is what you're talking about, right? So maybe we can kind of expand on, okay, we have this underlay, great. We're managing the fabric beautifully. We're provisioning things, upgrades, troubleshooting. That's all in place. What benefit are we adding by putting NSX on top?
Right. Well, if you think of it, we play in this game up here. This is our location. This is where we play. This up here, this would be in that hypervisor-based location. So here in this hypervisor area, where we would have our series of clusters for a specific set of services. So in that hypervisor, we would like to play that, or lay down our NSX platform. And our NSX platform is going to have a requirement for those key infrastructure set of communications about systems. Well, with ACI, that essentially means we need to create a series of endpoint groupings. Well, those endpoint groupings have a dependency upon a set of abstractions for fabric access policies that have to be created inside of the fabric initially before you can go creating an ACI tenant that would provide that application profile for the use of those endpoint groups.
Right.
So in essence, you create a series of fabric policies so that we essentially state what fabric policies you need to create. We tell you specifically in our design guide the series of policies, whether it be the switch group policies, the leaf interface policies, selector policies, etc., and then assemble them together so that they communicate. They provide that attachment point for the physical domains that Cisco is going to require. So Cisco will say that you're going to have a physical domain object that's going to provide the encapsulation of the VLANs communication between each of these structured locations. So for us, we need to have essentially 4 of these VLANs at each of these locations. All right? And each of those 4 VLANs, those are our EPGs. All right, so we're going to go ahead and map EPGs to VLANs essentially. And those 4 EPGs, as we've always stated all along, have always been management, vMotion, IP storage if in use, right? Because Fiber Channel is now also an available service within the FX series of the TORs of Cisco ACI, and transport. Now,
Yeah,
transport, let's define what each of these are. Management is management. We're talking vCenter, NSX, as well as the controllers. Remember, we have a management set of services, and if you look on the top stream up there, it'll even show you, it says we have management, we have those, and the NSX controllers. So that's what the management communication. So that's vCenter as well as NSX. vMotion, well, of course, everybody knows vMotion. That's our standard vSphere servicing for migrating virtual machine compute services from one node to another. IP storage, that's self-explanatory. Transport is always a little mystery, right? Well, for us, transport, that's our NSX platform. That's where we play a role where tunnel endpoints within NSX provides an establishment of communication for the NSX overlay. And that NSX overlay is where we actually deploy all of our applications. So our apps would be deployed here, completely disaggregated from the physical infrastructure, providing easy agility for the servicing and application dependency that we will go ahead and lay down, whether that be security, load balancing, NAT, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe up here we have like some of the blueprints, right? So maybe we have a kind of a traditional 3-tier app, maybe web, app. Ooh, here's my marker. Web, app, and DB. Right, and then we have our logical switching and kind of a router connecting it, right? So
Correct.
here what you're saying is that, okay, we have our underlay down here. Up here we have our overlay. And our overlay consists of network virtualization and security, right? And basically some services, right?
That's correct.
On top of it. So we can go replicate this a bunch of different times, multi-machine blueprints, all that greatness that you don't have to really abstract from the fabric that's down here. So if we, maybe if I erase my little underlay over here real quick, then we're able to expand this way, where say you have ACI here today, maybe yesterday you had Nexus 7Ks, 5Ks, 2Ks.
At the typical 752.
I mean, when you present this at VMware all the time, what about like Catalyst 6509s? Like, did we still have some customers running those, right?
That's right.
Maybe we put some Cat 6509s there. They never seem to go away. So all your legacy infrastructure. And then if we move this direction, right, we move into the cloud. And this is where our virtual cloud networking comes into play, where we can connect all of your, say, Azure, AWS, even hosted environments, IBM, any other kind of any of our VCCP partners that we have available. So I mean, we don't really care what the underlay is. We can abstract that and actually provide a lot of benefit. But what you're saying, Paul, just to kind of wrap up here on this design pieces, I know that you have a ton of detail here for this, and we actually have this and if you go to communities.vmware.com for our NSX page.
All right, yeah, well, with our current design that's out there, that was the one that we did originally.
Yep.
That one's a 30-some page. It's got some pretty good information when it details the general aspects that we've outlined in here. We're going to be producing one very shortly that will be, as the one I've been mentioning, that's going to give us a bit more finer detail on how to go about constructing these policies, constructing the endpoint groupings, as well as then how these all interplay with one another, their relative importance, why you should be doing so, what is our thought and feelings in that regard. But the idea being that what Jacob just noted is that essentially that agility and how our deployment of our platform on top of here plays out going further into our virtual cloud network. And the idea that as long as we can provide that disaggregation from the infrastructure here, where the infrastructure is leveraged for the services that's required of it within each of its own individual siloed data centers, but at the same point, we provide a scheme that allows operational capability for policy management that's much more symmetric across a broader portion of a customer's deployment of their workloads, right?
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, this is great stuff. So, I mean, has Cisco, I mean, you saw it, right? It was 2-3 months ago, Cisco actually came out with a design guide of their own.
That's correct.
So I mean, I think when we looked at that design guide, they added kind of some other areas to go look at too. But kind of maybe on a note to leave you on is that as we come out with this new design guide, which should be out actually any day now, externally, we take a look at where the intersection is, right? I mean, as I go back to the very opening, when we talked about this meeting in this telepresence room in Palo Alto, we the customer was really focused on the areas where we agree. Because ultimately, as a partnership between VMware and Cisco, there is areas we can agree on, and those design aspects we can agree on. I think those are where we should focus our time and energy on, and we'll get there for the rest of it, but that's where we see most customer deployments today. And thank you for joining us in this party bus at Cisco Live. We're off to meet with some more customers, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Jacob.